I'm tempted. Good afternoon. I'm tempted. Good afternoon. And more.
Oh, it's so great to see
Can I
you.
take a nap? This is so
They bring them over and then they kill them. They just, they just work you. Marty, first of all, Country to Country is now 24 hours old, and you were doing a gig last night. Where was it? How was it?
We started the series in Dublin, and it felt great. It felt great. This trip is really special to me because we haven't been over in this part of the world in about 8 or 9 years. Is that right? And so it feels like coming back to the homeland. You know, in my opinion, this is where country music came from in the first place, and this is like touching the very beginning. That's great.
So good night. And I mean, did you like the whole setup, the idea of Country to Country? Did it appeal to you, the fact of, going around with the other artists and so on?
Absolutely. Because, going back to the old days of country music, there was a fellow named George Hamilton IV.
Yes.
Who was a great ambassador. They would always call him the ambassador who could go, to Europe and sing country songs. And there were other people. When I was in Johnny Cash's band, he was a fellow that could always work over here. So there were a few artists. But the Wembley Festival in the 70s and the 80s were kind of a stepping stone. And I feel like Country to Country these days is just another plateau. And it's another sign of the acceptance, the global acceptance of country music, and a new generation of country fans that keep coming. So thank you. We gave us some more work. That's good.
Marty, if you just bear with me for a second, I'm going to try to recap your CV here a little. So stop me if any of this is not true, okay? Okay. You played your first gig as a professional musician aged 13. You met your wife.
9.
So I knew that.
Started my first band when I was 9.
I knew this would happen.
I'll be quiet.
You met your wife, Connie Smith, when you were 12 years old, and she was in her late 20s, and you told your mother, I'm going to marry that woman. 25 years later, it happened.
Guilty.
In 1980, you joined Johnny Cash's band, and you stayed for 5 years. You were, for a short while, along with Sir Nick Lowe, as we like to call him, Johnny Cash's son-in-law. You're a wonderful photographer. We'll talk about that later. You've produced beautiful books of prints from your extensive travels. You have, and you can react appropriately here, 5 Grammy Awards.
Wow.
You have the most extensive collection of country music artifacts outside of the Country Music Hall of Fame, and the collection, which includes Patsy Cline's boots and something I love very much, Hank Williams' glasses. Is that right?
That's true.
Yeah. And those who know, and I do know, say that along with your band, the Fabulous Superlatives, you play the hottest, fastest, down-home, earth-shaking country music anywhere on the planet. That is true, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Shall we, I always like to back these kind of statements up. Shall we have some evidence? Yeah. Listen to this.
I worked in fields of cotton, I worked in fields of corn, but I ain't seen nothing like it since the day I was born. I've been a rockin', I've been a rollin'. Some folks think I look foolish, let it make a fool out of me.
That's Marty Stuart and the Fabulous Superlatives and Country Boy from Ghost Train.
That's right.
Which is a really interesting record. We'll talk a little bit, but that was a record that you recorded in an iconic studio, wasn't it?
It was. RCA Studio B. And if you ever go to, and I'm sure a lot of you have been to Nashville, but if you've never been to Nashville, one of the places you want to see, it's a bit out of the way, but the Country Music Hall of Fame now oversees Studio B. They call it the home of 1,000 hits. Elvis Presley recorded a lot of his songs there. Everybody, Patsy Cline, Connie Smith, Porter Wagoner, Dolly Parton, on and on and on. Hit after hit after hit was recorded there. And they use it now as a classroom for students to work in. And it was no longer a functioning studio, but that was the first studio I ever worked at in Nashville when I was a kid with Lester Flatt. So I got permission. We went in there and made one more country record, and I was really happy to go back there.
And the last time that we were there as a program, we were talking to Connie Smith, which was lovely, where she first recorded.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Mrs. Marty. Marty, you are a Mississippi boy, and you've now been hooked by the mythical West. It's a really interesting. You've made this new. Marty's just delivered. What did the kids say? Dropped? Yeah. You've dropped a new record. Is it this Friday?
It was yesterday.
Yes, exactly.
Yesterday.
Brand new album called Way Out West, and you've been hooked by the charms of California.
I loved the West when I was a kid. The first two records that I ever owned was a Johnny Cash record and a Lester Flatt and Earl Scruggs record. And there was a song on that Johnny Cash record called Don't Take Your Guns to Town. And in Mississippi's about 3,000 miles away from the West. And so in my bedroom, and when he was singing that song, I was transported in my imagination out to where cowboys and Indians and those kind of characters roamed. And so we finally got around to making a record called Way Out West, which is a love letter to the American West and a lot of those things from the state of California that kind of inspired me.
And it was recorded, it was written about the West, and it was recorded in the West. Is that right?
That's correct, in Hollywood.
With someone who's a very significant guitarist and writer that I think that you presumably got to know over the course of years, Mike Campbell.
Mike Campbell, who plays with Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. Yeah. And he's a wonderful guitar, world-class musical citizen. And the two of us met back in the 90s when we were both playing on a Johnny Cash record called Unchained. So John said, come be on my record. I went, okay. He was my old chief. And so I showed up in the studio, and I found out that Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers and myself, we were his band for that record. So that's where Mike Campbell and I got to know each other.
Yeah, fantastic connection. We played a track on the show on Tuesday, if you're listening on Tuesday night, which is just tucked away at the end of the album. But I think in some kind of way that it sums up a lot of the record, because this is a little instrumental that you put at the end of Way Out West. Can we have a little listen to this? Because in ways it reminds me, it's so cinematic. Have a listen to this. Beautiful, isn't it? Absolutely beautiful.
I like that.
And it reminded me of something. It reminded me of the soundtracks to the spaghetti westerns. It reminded me of Ennio Morricone's music at points. Did you see it like that, as a visual, as a soundtrack to a movie in your head almost?
Absolutely. The word cinematic is right. I scored a film a few years back for my friend Billy Bob Thornton called All the Pretty Horses. And it had a beautiful score to it. And the story required.
It's a Cormac McCarthy novel.
That's right, Cormac's novel. But the script required that kind of music. Yeah. And at the end of the film, I went, I want to make some more of that kind of music someday, but maybe a little more country, So it worked out.
Well, it's a beautiful thing. It's a really, really lovely record. Let's also listen to the first single, a little clip from the first single, because this is a song that is the title track to Marty's new, this first release that you'll get from Way Out West. It's called Whole Lotta Highway, and it's a song that I think falls into a really great tradition, because it reminds me of all truck driving great country songs. And I was thinking of things like Willin' by Little Feat and Drugstore Truck Driving Man by the Byrds, and a song that we got introduced to us, which is described as bluegrass truck driving by Sturgill Simpson, called That Long White Line, which Sturgill covered. And it sort of reminds me of this tradition. You can comment on that. Have a little listen to this.
I've got 100 cups of hot coffee running through my lines. Be about a half an hour, and I'll be seeing that Barstow sign. I'm out in the middle of nowhere, driving through a night as black as coal. Seen a whole lot of highway with 1,000,000 miles to go.
Lovely, isn't it? Beautiful?
Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. Would you say that's right, Marty? Because there is that great tradition of, I suppose, driving and being this isolated figure behind a kind of truck. Would it be in that great tradition of truck driving songs?
Absolutely. It's motion. I'm addicted to motion, I think. And in my house in Mississippi when I was a kid, the train ran behind the house. And it was really, a good ways back, but it sounded like it was coming through our, bedroom at night. And I loved that train. I used to dream about just getting on that train and riding. I wanted to go to Nashville and play music with all those people back then. But that summer when I was 12 years old, I was traveling and my mom and dad let me go and play with a gospel group called the Sullivan Family Gospel Singers. It was pretty much concentrated in the American South. But that summer I discovered applause, and I discovered, I probably made $100 the whole summer playing my mandolin, but I discovered cool people that dressed funny and had their hair weird, and they stayed up all night and talked about music all the time. And I discovered how much I love hanging out with girls. And so all of those things that summer, and when the summer was over, they dropped me off at the edge of town, and I felt like the circus had kind of dropped me off and kicked me to the curb. And I thought, no, I want more of that. And there's no end to it. There's a line in that song that says, the white line is a mystery, a never-ending trail that knows more about me than I know about myself. But it keeps calling, and I keep driving. Through the wind and the rain and the snow, I've seen a whole lot of highway with 1,000,000 miles to go. And that sums up my life pretty well.
Beautiful. Marty, when you moved to Nashville, as you did as a young kid, did you ever go back to Mississippi, or did you stay in Nashville?
My folks lived in Mississippi for about a year and a half or 2 more years, I think it was. And I lived with a fella in Lester Flatt's band, and then I lived with Lester Flatt and his wife till my folks could come back up there. But I still go back home to Mississippi a lot. We have a lot of extended family down there, so it's kind of like this homeland over here. You can, what's that old line in the Eagles song? You can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave. And I don't want to leave. It's home,
Yeah, still home. But essentially, you moved to Nashville, and it kind of caught you in its trap, and you've been based there, haven't you? For a long
I have.
time?
Nashville was, they called it country. I called it country boy Hollywood. I didn't want to go to Hollywood and act. I didn't think I was made to do that, or New York and be on a Broadway play. It was those 2 first records, Johnny Cash and Flatt and Scruggs, country music. It touched my heart. It touched my heart, and I could see, if I looked outside my window, the farmers that people talked about, and everyday people of the land, the working people, the truck drivers, and real life experiences. That's what touched me about country music, and I wanted to go be a part of that world. I did.
And you are.
Yeah.
You are. You're the center of that world, as far as we're concerned. I want to show the audience. This is not very kind of. We're at the BBC. We find it hard to get big visuals organized. But I'm going to show you this anyway, even though it's a radio. This is a beautiful thing. This is the front cover of Marty's book of photographs. Is it true that, as I remember it, your mother gave you the gift of a camera?
I called her from New York City the first time I went. I discovered that I wanted to take photographs, and she mailed me one up to Nashville.
Isn't that beautiful? And Marty had a camera ever since he was a kid, and he's carried it around with him. And when I looked at the photograph on the front of this book, I was trying to think, is that an old American president? But you can perhaps, people probably won't see it from very far away, but remind us who this is.
That is the last portrait ever taken of Johnny Cash, and he was my next door neighbor. So that is 4 days before he passed away. And we got time for a story?
Of course we have.
Well, I had been to my favorite record of all time is Johnny Cash at Folsom Prison. I just think that record is the best. It personifies and defines country music and rock and roll and American music at its finest. And it was a moment for him because he was coming up out of the ashes when everybody kind of written him off. So I wanted to go. We played in the town of Folsom, California. And I wanted to go and see where they recorded that record inside the prison. And I think Arnold Schwarzenegger was the governor at the time. So somebody made a call to the governor's office and got me a pass to go inside the prison. So I was given a tour, and they recorded the album at the cafeteria, inside the cafeteria. So I stood there, and they did it in the morning. They did the record 2 times, all the way through, took a break, and did it again, just in case they missed anything. But what really astounded me was behind the back wall of the cafeteria was the hanging gallows, where they used to execute people. And just the vibe of that place was really heavy and really dark. But what it's used for now is the prison band hall. So there's one set of instruments at Folsom Prison, and on like Monday the country band plays them, and on Tuesday the rap band has it, and on down the line. So the day I was there, it happened to be the day that the country music band was rehearsing. And we played Folsom Prison Blues, and we played Mama Tried, and we played The Whiskey Ain't Working Anymore, and those songs meant more than they ever have. But all the way home to Nashville on the airplane, I kept thinking about hanging gallows, hangman. What an awful job it must be to have to take people's lives. I said, what do you do? Go home at night and tell your wife, I did a great job today. And so I wrote this song. It was a bit heavy, and it was called Hangman, and I got this far with it. I said, I killed another man today. It's hard to believe. I lost count at 30, and I've grown too numb to grieve. The bottle helps me cope when I lay down at night, and when the dope rolls through my veins, it all fades out of sight. Hangman, hangman, that's my stock and trade. Hangman, hangman, sending bad men to their graves. And so I'd gone next door to visit JR and to tell him about my Folsom experience and sing him what I had of this song. And I said, hangman, hangman, sending bad men to their graves. And from his wheelchair, he spoke up and said, who killed who? I ask myself time and time again. God have mercy on the soul of this hangman. I went, that's pretty good. And we wrote one more verse, and it was done. So at the end of the meeting, I stood up and I said, I have to go to Washington, D.C. to play a show. Are you okay? He said, I'm fine. I said, you got plenty of rope? He said, I got plenty of rope. I said, your spirit good? I said, your spirit good. And I kissed him on his forehead. I said, I love you. And he said, I love you too. He said, is there anything in this room you want? I said, just your love. He said, you got it. And 4 days later, I was on my way back to Nashville after the tour, and I got the news at like 3:30 in the morning that he was gone. But that was the last meeting. So that's the last photograph.
And you took a photograph
song.
that day of that conversation.
Yeah.
What a beautiful. Thank you for sharing that story. I'm going to lose it. Let's have a listen to Hangman.
Hangman, hangman, that's my stock and trade. Hangman, hangman, sending bad men to their graves. Well, who killed who? I ask myself time and time again. God have mercy on the soul of this hangman.
Marty Stuart, Johnny Cash. Just talking about, we were talking about Mike Campbell earlier on, and that amazing series of recordings that John Cash did in the 90s, the American recordings. And you were very much involved in the one that was, I think it was Unchained, it was called, from 1996. Mm-hmm. I can't remember if it was 2 or 3, and that's when you met Mike Campbell. Was that for you, having left Johnny's band in the 80s, but seeing his career? I mean, I suppose for young people, they were kind of taking up Johnny Cash again because of the Rick Rubin connection. Was it great for you? Were you pleased that a new generation had discovered?
Absolutely. The first time I came to this city, I was in his band, and I think we did a Christmas special. Was it in Edinburgh? At somewhere, and then we came here and did some shows. But the thing about it, when I was in his band in the 80s, in general, in the United States, nobody much cared about Johnny Cash anymore. He was just a legend that played county fairs and played auditoriums for, older generation of people. And when I first joined the band, I thought, I'm going to go to work with the guy that made the Folsom Prison record, and I'm going to go to work with the guy who made the Bitter Tears Indians records. But I found out he was more of a patriot. And when we would come to Europe, I could see what he had on his mind, because I could tell that he wasn't through, and he was not satisfied with being written off and out to pasture. And I could see, because young people responded to him over here in a way that they did not in the States. And I knew that his son-in-law at that time was Nick Lowe, then there was me, and then there was Rodney Crowell. All these young people were forming around him. And after I left his band, I started having a bunch of radio hits, and he didn't. But anytime he would call, he was my chief, and I would go back and be his guitar player. Anything to get it started. But when the next generation of kids found him and wore the Cash T-shirt, with tattoos and spiked, I went, well, he made it. He made it again. But the thing about it is, he will make it to the next generation as well, because that body of work will live on forever.
Yeah. It was a great record. You mentioned it was Tom Petty and Tom Petty's band that were really the band, along with you. And later on, Roseanne, his daughter, was to bring out an album called The List, which was some of the songs. I'd love to know what that whole list was, but some of the songs on that list were the songs that 100 songs that Johnny Cash thought everyone should know, part of country music. And this was one of the ones that you recorded on that session. This is Don Gibson's Sea of Heartbreak.
This sea of heartbreak, lost love and loneliness, memories of your caress, so divine, how I wish you were mine again, my dear. I'm on this sea of tears, sea of heartbreak.
Beautiful.
You know what I miss about him more than anything else is his sense of humor. He had a sick sense of humor. Barbara Walters came down one day, and he could walk in a room, and I could take one look at him and tell, well, this is going to be a good night or this is going to be a rough night. I could just look at him, and I just knew, my chief. And so Barbara Walters came to do a TV interview one time with him, and I went out to the house to watch it. And she was doing a special on Johnny Carson, Walter Cronkite, who was a broadcaster in the States, and Johnny Cash. And so he came downstairs, and I went, uh-oh, this is going to be a little bumpy today, I think. And the first question out of Barbara's mouth was, Johnny? And he was really sweating and twitching, and he was, flitting around. I was like, uh-oh. And so she said, Johnny, do you ever talk to your children about drugs? And John said, yeah, and ain't none of them got any. That sense of humor.
Brilliant. Listen, but we haven't got much time, but let's talk about one other person. And there's a beautiful photographs in the book of this man as well. Nearly a year ago, we lost another great Californian country musician, Mr. Merle Haggard. And he left behind a fantastic body of work, which we are celebrating, by the way, every week on Another Country. We're playing a Merle tune every week. Tell me a little bit about your relationship with Merle and just how great a loss that is.
He was one of my dearest friends. Next to Johnny Cash, he was my other dearest friend in country music. And he called me from his hospital bed like 2 weeks before he passed away. He said, I just wrote me a new song. And man, when he would say that, I'd feel like a million miles tall because I thought, Merle Haggard is sharing a new song with me. He said, it's called My Last Escape. I went, all right. And he went quietly. And I knew they took him away from a hospital. He wanted to go back home. And Merle was a road warrior too, so he was in his tour bus. And I was walking the yard just worrying about it, and Connie would say, it's going to be okay. I said, no, he's gone. And he was riding off into the California sunset, and I could vision him riding in that bus. And he passed away at his home in the front of his bus. And what got me was that he had written out his own service, his farewell service, and he called and he wanted Connie to sing. And he wanted me to oversee the entire service. So I was the preacher, I guess, at Merle's service. Amazing. But he left behind an incredible body of work. And I think if you have to define country music by one set of songs, probably Merle Haggard's songs define that 20th century country music as well as anybody's.
Should we play a little clip of the song that you, I think, did sing at the service? I think you'll love this.
They're taking you away and leaving me lonely, silver wings slowly fading out of sight.
Ricky, we get down to the question here at Country to Country, or C2C, whatever it's called. What is country music? I keep getting asked that question. I said it's the same thing it was 100 years ago, 50 years ago. Hank Williams said it was sincerity. Harlan Howard described it as it's three chords and the truth. My wife, Connie Smith, says it's the cry of the heart.
Beautiful.
And those are beautiful descriptions of country music. And regardless what generation has country music in their hands and writing songs, I hope it's always honest and from the heart and speaks to the reality of life, because that's when country music, in my opinion, is at its finest and at its most beautiful point, when it's real and sincere.
I got to tell you, we've run out of time, but it's, we could be with you for, we could do this for another hour and a half. Don't worry. You have got to do a gig tonight, and are you excited about what you see? Because I know that, I've heard you talking to our old friend Eddie Stubbs and the radio and chewing the fat over the kind of where country's going and where it's not going and all the rest of it. But are you still excited by new things? You've got young Maren Morris, for example, who's coming on here. She's opening tonight, or in fact, she's the second on the bill tonight, but she's, one of that new generation of people who are tipping their hat to the great man, chief, as you call it.
Absolutely. Connie and I, but we both started very young. Connie and her career started very young, had a lot of success. I started so young. But Connie and I watched for young artists, young songwriters, young musicians that have it, really have it. And we cheer them on and we root for them. And anything we can do to give any advice, hand around the neck, whatever, just ask us, because it's about nurturing young talent. And when Maren came through, that I loved her song, My Church.
Yeah.
And I loved her 80s Mercedes song. I think she has it. I think she has everything it takes. She's a real star. She was born to do it. She didn't come off a singing show, a talent show. She's organically worked her way up. And I love that. I love the songs of Brandy Clark. I love the Honesty and Eric Church's songs. I love Old Crow Medicine Show. There's a lot going on in the wheelhouse of country music that's going to propel it forward into this century just fine.
We love all these records too, don't we? And we love Marty Stuart.
Yeah. I love you. Thank you.